Hey everyone, Brandy here with Duly Noted. Today we're going to talk inks. So we're going to go over the two basic type of inks and then one that's pretty common but is kind of a mixture of the two. We're going to go over uses for them and the difference in pads and ink pads, sizes and materials they're made out of. We're just going to really dive deep into the basics. So if that interests you, stay tuned. Please hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you can be notified each time I post a video. Let's get into it. So first off, this is by no means an all-inclusive, this is all that's available and out there list. These are just a selection of the ones that I possess, but that does not mean that that is all that is out there. We are going to go over pigment inks, dye inks, and then a hybrid. The first we're going to go over are your pigment inks. What does that mean? So a pigment ink is where a solid, so your color, is suspended in a carrier. So in most cases, an oil or a water. This has been around for centuries. They would use animal or mineral or plants to provide the color, and it's been around for a very, very, very long time. What are some of the things that you can do with this particular type of ink? Because something that I learned in my journey is that not all inks are created equal. So they each have their own purpose and things that they're good for and things that they're not. So a pigment ink is opaque, which means you cannot see through it, which is good in the sense that it is layerable. So you can layer multiple colors on top of one another and see the one kind of before it. They sit on top of the paper so they don't absorb and dry very fast. They're a slow drying ink, which means they are good if you want to heat emboss. They are usually archival, which means they are fade resistant. They age really well. They last a long time. And they can be used for techniques like watercoloring. Now, in my journey, I started out and I thought that all inks were created equal. And so I would see creators stamp and get these beautiful, crisp, clean results that were just gorgeous. And I would stamp using inks, probably even the same stamp set, and my results were splotchy and uneven and looked terrible. And I could not understand what we were doing different. And it was because I didn't have the right ink for the job. You got to have the right tool for the job, right? I didn't have that. And so I learned throughout my crafting journey that not all inks are created equal. So these are good for stamping. I've used the Hero Arts inks for ink blending. That archival ink is water resistant. So if you want to watercolor, stamp an outline image in that archival ink and then watercolor around it, you can, and that ink won't bleed, it won't smear or smudge. One of the things to note about these particular ink pads is they require re-inking. Not so much the archival one, but that Delicata ink and one similar to that one require re-inking often. They dry out really fast, and they put down a lot of ink the first time, which is good, but that means that you probably want to have the re-inker. Now let's talk dye inks. What does that mean? This means that the color is dissolved in the liquid. It's not suspended or kind of floating in the liquid. It is dissolved into it. Now, if you look here, you've got 3 different sizes of ink pads, 3 different formations. Ink pads come in full-size ink pads, and some companies have full-size and mini ink cube type ones available. Depends on the manufacturer and the company. But let's talk about what dye inks can be used for, what they're good for. They are translucent, which means you can see through them. So when you go to layer, you can see the color below it, which means that they will mix. They are very vibrant usually, and they absorb into the paper, so you're less likely to smear them or smudge them. But this also means that they are not a good ink to heat emboss with, should you want to do something like that. They are water-based, and they give you less bleeding, less smearing outside of the lines of your images, and that kind of thing. They are fade resistant and really good, like I mentioned, for layering techniques, particularly stamp layering. One of the things to note, again, is that this particular ink in my hand right now, this Distress ink, that is the one that when I was first starting out, I was trying to stamp with. It was not meant for that. And so that's when I got frustrated with my results. And that's when I started to do some research and discovered not all inks are created equal. Now, the rest of those inks you see there are wonderful for stamping. They are great for that. That Distress ink is good for watercolor techniques, ink smushing, that kind of stuff. But it is not good for stamping. It's just not. You get splotchy, uneven results. It's not good for that. As you can see, there are different sizes, like I mentioned before. I like to have the full sets of all of the things. So but I am limited on space. So I like to have the mini ink cubes. That's what I enjoy. It lets me have a variety of colors, but contain them in the space that I have. Whereas I don't really have a lot of room for all of the full-size ink pads like the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink right here. I would if I could, but I don't. I don't possess the space for that. So I have a lot of the companies that offer mini ink cubes. And that's what I enjoy and have a lot of. Now let's talk about the one that is a mix of the two. These are hybrid inks, which means they have both pigment and dye properties to them. They may vary slightly on what they have, but they have a bit of both. They have the best of both worlds, in my opinion. That Distress Oxide ink is from the same maker as the Distress ink that I was trying to stamp with before and had terrible results. This is the same guy. He has the same colors throughout his entire line. They're consistent throughout his entire line, but this one is wonderful to stamp with. In fact, I have all of the full-size ink pads of these because I can do so many different techniques with them because they have the properties of both. So I actually have the reinkers for this and the full-size ink pads. And that Distress Oxide line and the Positively Saturated inks are the only two that I possess reinkers for and the full-size ink pads. I don't have the Positively Saturated inks in the mini ink cubes because they don't offer those outside of club kits. Which is fine, maybe someday. So here I'm just showing you again all of the different kinds that I have, and you can see the different sizes of the pads. Here I'm trying to show you that this is a foam pad. So how you apply the ink, or how the ink is, I guess how you apply the ink is different. So there are foam pads and there are felt pads. That Positively Saturated ink is a foam pad, which means it needs to be reinked more, but it stamps easier the first time. This is a felt pad. This Distress Oxide is a felt pad. It's a little more durable, but doesn't need to be reinked as often. I think it just holds more ink because of the type of material. Again, showing you kind of the ink pads that are more of a felt than a foam. The foam pad is a little more delicate. You can tear that one a little bit easier. I have not done that, but it is possible to do, whereas these felt pads right here are definitely more durable and more tough, I guess you could say. Let's review storage. So here, I believe I purchased these from scrapbook.com, possibly Amazon. I honestly can't remember. When in doubt, if I have the reinker, I put the reinker with the ink pad just because that's easier for me to store, and I know if I have a reinker, should I come across one that needs to be reinked. These are what I store my Positively Saturated inks. Again, remember that those and my oxides are the only ones that I possess the full-size ink pads for, just because I can do so many techniques with them. This holder that holds the Distress Oxide ink pads, that was purchased from Stampin' Storage, a great company. These hold my mini ink cubes, and they were also purchased from Stampin' Storage. These dividers and organizers were also purchased from Stampin' Storage at the same time. Now, these are a Stampin' Storage accessory drawer organizer, because obviously that ink pad is a very unique ink size. These ones from Catherine Pooler are a unique ink size and would not fit the other ones. I mentioned that I have Distress Oxide reinkers, and I'm gathering the collection of Positively Saturated reinkers, and I keep those in a Stampin' Storage reinker container as well.
So there you have it. I hope that helped you. I hope you learned something. If you did learn something new or were reminded of something that maybe you had forgotten, tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and know that you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please remember to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you can receive more videos and you're notified each time I upload a new one. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day and we will see you next time.